in the last few months. Today, we're going to be talking about selling in the international markets with Glenn McKnight. I have a few ground rules or webinar guidelines before getting started. This webinar will be recorded and it will be available on the Puerto Rico IT Cluster YouTube channel. Always please turn your microphone off and webcam during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, you may use the chat feature. For questions during the Q&A, please raise your virtual hand and wait for your turn. Then you can turn your microphone and webcam. That's optional. If you don't want to do it or you don't have a webcam, you don't have to do that. And please be respectful towards all our speakers and attendees. In the upcoming webinar series, we're going to have on November 9, that's a Tuesday, Federal Funds for the Commercialization of Innovative Technologies with Juan F. Figueroa. That's one of the most requested webinars for this year, so we're eager to have it, and we invite you all to subscribe for that webinar. And with further ado, we're going to introduce Glenn McKnight, technology entrepreneur. Here's his information, but he's going to be talking a little bit more about it in a few more minutes. Welcome, Glenn.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody to the session. And I feel very honored to be the sandwich middle between Teddy and Juan. I worked well with them together. We worked with PRTC Awards. We were part of a team of 3 where we actually evaluated new businesses for the awards this year. So Sophia and the gang of us were hard at work evaluating the proposal. So I'm happy to be here. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and so let me do that right now, so you can see my. Let's see. You can see my screen, okay?
Yeah, I can see the screen. Good.
Okay.
Now,
so
okay, the presentation. Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Okay. So let me give you some background. When we were interviewing some of the applicants, we were basically surprised to find out in most of the businesses, and in fact, I think all of the businesses had no international plan. They had no plan for doing business with the government. It was like an area that it was not in their, I guess, scope of thinking or where they wanted to go. And so what I hope to do today is to sort of, tell you about my own personal history, what I've done in marketing strategies and international business opportunities. And some of them were successful and some of them were not so successful. And so I'm going to be truthful to you in terms of what challenges we had and what worked and what didn't. So no, I'm not going to try to paint a picture that people outside of Puerto Rico in some land that they're all ready to give you all their money and expect very little service for it. So let's make that straight. So, okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. So the objectives here is to talk to you about the opportunities. I'm going to talk to you about current business with government. I'm going to talk about what is an effective strategy and hopefully, touch on some of the incentives. I'm not saying it's entirely all the incentives. You got to look laterally. I'm sure some of you have up your sleeve some ideas on incentives that you may be aware of that's in Puerto Rico that I'm not aware of. Remember, I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm coming from Canada in a place that's actually getting cold and dark. It's sliding into winter. So my sense of international markets is not going to be exactly the same what you guys are doing. But on the other hand, much of the strategy is the same. So let me give you a little bit of background. And I alluded to that in the first slide, but let me go into detail. I'm going to talk about the current project I'm doing, which is the Virtual School of Internet Governance, which I'm doing with Alfredo Calderon, which is a retired dean at the, I believe, the University of Puerto Rico. But in trading experiences, I'll talk about the Beijing Radio. It's a wind-up radio. I'll talk to you about that. I'll talk about the Ink Media Netbook. I'll talk about trade missions in technology exchange to China. I'll talk about the Linux or Linux Professional Institute and accreditation as well. So all of those 4 items I just listed are all experiences that I had in international trade, whether it's goods or services. So let's talk about the Beijing Radio. It's also called a free play radio. It was invented by a guy on Eel Island, a guy who actually, believe it or not, was in the circus. It occurred to him that they needed a technology that didn't require to be plugged in or a battery. So if you see on the right-hand side of this radio, this was the F1. This was the very first, and then the second version of the radio was half the size, but both of them, you crank it roughly 30 rotations, and that would be good for 40 minutes, and it gave you AM, FM, and shortwave radio. Now, this was developed in a community called Stanton in Cape Town, South Africa. They effectively tapped into international monies. They were very good at raising funds to purchase huge quantities of the radios for good work. So one of the key markets was getting this radio into people who needed emergency power. That could be on a boat, that could be at a cottage, that could be someone in a car or a camper. A survivalist would be a natural. So if you look at the key markets, this was wholesaling at roughly $85 US, with markup to wholesalers at $115, selling out at the market at $150. So when this got launched, we saw this product, and they were targeting this to not-for-profit organizations as one of the major avenues to go out there and purchase large quantities of these radios, and then basically turn around with those radios, make a, it's called it's a different way of fundraising for a not-for-profit. It's sort of a semi-business venture that they had, but they didn't really have the business acumen, most of the not-for-profits, nor the capitalization to purchase really large volumes. So when I went after the rights to the product, I partnered with an agency that actually did a lot of work in Central America, working with Guatemala and El Salvador, which had its challenges. Now it's even worse now, but it was basically looking at the funds raised from selling of these radios in the U.S. and Canadian market to actually underwrite their multi-million-dollar operation. So it worked fairly well. So we launched this radio in throughout the 90s, and unfortunately, this is where the negative side. It was making money, and like anything else, you got to spend around $8 per radio for marketing, which is not cheap when you want to sell hundreds of thousands of this product. So we looked at international agencies. We looked at sales, not just in United States and Canada, but elsewhere as well. So each I got to tell you this story. The first container, that's 24-foot container. Yeah, it was 2,400 radios, the first container. So when it arrived in Canada, it was allegedly in a bonded warehouse, but and on the bill of lading, and that's what you get when you get shipments of product into a country, it stated explicitly radios. Now, if you're a thief and you see electronics or radios, you salivate, right? So the first shipment we got, which was $176,000, got stolen. So it was a bad omen. I should have stayed home. It should have said, well, maybe this was a mistake. But we went through the whole process. My partner at the time doing this didn't know what FOB was. or CIF, didn't understand those expressions in terms of freight. As soon as it left the door in Cape Town, it's your property. From the time it gets onto the truck, the time it gets onto the boat, the time it gets into a bonded warehouse, the time it gets to your warehouse, you're responsible. It has to be insured. And needless to say, it wasn't insured. So that was a kick in the teeth, but we brought the business up to about $2.5 million per year throughout the 90s. And then basically my partner decided to get drunk and say some silly things. And we had, this is the problem. If you're buying a product, international market, and the only company that manufactures that product, you can't go shopping around to get something. No one else was doing this. And they decided not to sell us anymore, and they took our customer list. So we ended up suing them in international court. Now that's another thing that you've got to be completely conscious of, and you learn from experience, is when somebody has their business registration in many locations, and some of them are shell companies and in the Cayman Islands and all over the place. The ethics of the company, just because they're selling a ethical product, doesn't mean they're ethical. So we lost $5 million on this project. So that was a real kick in the teeth. So that was the Beijing Radio experience. But you know what? You sort of live and learn, and that was my first big venture in international trade. So let me move on to another sad story. Okay, next one is the Ink Media netbook. In fact, I have one of the netbooks here. When I turn off this and have my video, I can play with it with you. It's using sugar. It has a lean Linux-based netbook. It was the first netbook on the market before netbooks were happening. It was cheaper than one laptop per child, which was launched by Negroponte. We set up manufacturing in Malaysia. It had lower volumes and quality productions issues, but it in Malaysia was a lot better than China. So the manufacturing in China required massive quantities. So the product was pretty good, except like some things. I don't know. I can't see you guys, but I don't know how many of you had a netbook, but I can't. I do a lot of conferences, not lately, but I've never seen anybody with a netbook. I've looked around and I see people with a nice smaller Chromebook. I see them with a nice thin Apple, but I never see anybody with a netbook at all. So I don't know where they all disappeared to, but this was a capitalization issue. So we ended up meeting the market where the product lacked demand. So that was my number 2 experience in the international market. Okay, so I started working, and I formed an organization called the Energy Conservation Society of Ontario. We had an MOU with the Chinese Energy Conservation Association. Just let me do a sound check. Sophie, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Am I speaking too fast? Do you want me to slow down?
I think you're doing, it's just perfect.
Okay, and it's loud enough, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the Energy Conservation Society of Ontario is a not-for-profit organization focused on energy efficiency and energy conservation. In our association with the MOU we signed with the Chinese Energy Conservation Association, we set up a number of trade missions of going to China, to Beijing, and this was starting in the 90s. And I assure you, folks, when you went into Beijing, it looked like something from communist Russia. All the buildings had a communist look that you would think of Romania, Armenia, or Russia. They're basically primarily bicycles. You saw very little cars. All the cars were Volkswagen Jettas at the time. The air quality, you could cut the air with a knife. It was so acidic, burning your eyes because the coal that they were burning for heating their homes and cooking. The place was a disaster from an ecological point of view. So we took a number of Canadian American technologies. We did this trade mission, the first one, with a bunch of American companies, and it just shows you the difference between American and Canadian companies. Within the first weekend, and we did this conference with Al Gore. The first weekend, the American companies did $5 million in trade deals. That's the difference between Canadians and Americans. The Canadians are so bloody conservative and paranoid. They did not, they did not make a move, and a lot of it was very favorable terms at the time to do any manufacturing in China, to enter into the Chinese market, as well as exporting back out. And so they had a special trade mission, no taxes, all kinds of incentives. But the American companies jumped all over it. That's why you don't have any manufacturing left in America, because these companies had such a massive opportunity to relocate. That's why you have Apple and everyone manufacturing, and now you have a supply chain problem. But they were going like mad into the Chinese market. So subsequent to that mission, we had Chinese delegations come virtually every year. And in fact, I don't know if my video is on, but the hat I have on was a gift from one of the mayors in Western China. You guys may be aware of the issue of the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are a group of people that are Eurasian, and they're the Muslim population of Western parts of China, and they're getting a little bit victimized. But this is one of the hats that they gave me. So yeah, so I think the trade mission was really an interesting experience, working with governments, working with associations, getting that MOU with the associations, and then cultivating the companies to go with us to trade. Now, one of the big trade deals we almost had was with a guy who was manufacturing vinyl windows. And that was a very, very big window contract, because the windows in China were, and all the buildings needed to be replaced. They were all really old steel technology, cold as hell in Beijing. In fact, colder than where I am. And unfortunately, the guy got really, the untrustworthiness happened with the Canadian manufacturer. Well, actually, they're not in business anymore. I'm not going to mention their name, but they were unfortunate. They didn't move the contracts along. They wanted way too much, and that's not what was agreed upon. So it was a bit embarrassing. But so what happened is, how I was making money in that trade deal is bringing the parties together. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Okay, so as I move along in my professional career, I said, that's enough. I'm going to go work for somebody. So I was tired of 10 years of chasing business on my own. So I linked up with the Linux Professional Institute. It was a consulting contract first, and then they liked me so much they hired me. So the Linux Professional Institute, it's been around about 10, 20 years. The primary certification, it's in Spanish and Portuguese and German, French, Japanese. That's Spanish. Yeah, that's the primary languages. And they were working with the institutes, the View and Prometric testing centers for online testing. And so I worked with them for 10 years. I was a director of certification and business development. And it took me to 42 countries. And it's interesting because in many of the countries, I would go in and I would talk about open source strategy, and which was contrarian to the corruption that Microsoft was doing in terms of selling more licenses than people in the country, like in Benin and in other parts of West Africa. But what's interesting is when we're seeing some of this stuff happening, but it's kind of interesting when you look at the the use of the operating systems, it still hasn't really, the needle hasn't really moved in 20 years, even though that everybody talks about open source or free and open source software. It's still largely roughly 82% Windows, 10% Apple product, and a few people using open source, whether Ubuntu or whatever. In my laptop, I have a dual boot. I can work in both platforms. It's fine. But what was interesting is developing partnerships. And this is where your business opportunities can really, you have a core product, which is the Linux certification. But the same person, if they want to go, a map or a certification, they would want to have a database open source certification, and they want an operating certification. So starting from an intro cert to an Ubuntu to a MySQL, maybe an Apache cert, maybe a Java cert to go on top of that, with the 3 levels of LPI. So you're looking at $1,000 per person that you could look at in terms of them committed to a certification. Now, I don't know what it's like in Puerto Rico, and I'm sorry I can't see hands, or I can't see the chat. I'm in full screen, but I could tell you from experience, North America, and I don't know about Puerto Rico, but in North America, IT certification is a tough sell. Whether it's Microsoft, remember the MCSE and NT and all that stuff before that, Novell, a lot of that stuff just gone. Like it basically, it's like vaporware. But there is certain cultures like Germany and Japan, which understands the importance of having a certification, and it's baked into the culture. In North America, and I'm not sure if it's in Puerto Rico, I'm sure it is that they'll say, well, never mind a piece of paper. What's important is your skill. And yeah, what can I say? So, it is what it is. So, this is only one version. There was other people working on certification as well, but I think the practicum is absolutely critical. Okay, so I want to do a quick synopsis, and unfortunately Teddy's not here, and I can't see. Maybe Sylvia, can you see how many people here actually were at Teddy's session? Was that last week or the week before?
The week before.
And can you see if anybody's responding? Because I only see my full screen.
No, not in the comments, not yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. It was if you can get the time to watch his, the video is available, right?
Yeah, correct. It's in the YouTube channel. I'm gonna put the link in the comments, so it's available for everyone.
Yeah, he's got a lot of practical experience working with the U.S. government. Like I said, in discussion with the applicants for the PRITC awards, Teddy and myself and Juan, we were very keen on the idea of encouraging people to do government business. And so let's look at the valuation. So as of 2017, and we can increase this, especially with COVID-19, many companies, organizations, whether it's Zoom or others, have moved this needle a lot further along. But the last valuation, this is from the U.S. government site, that to do business with the U.S. government, it's $1 trillion in value. I would suspect it's probably 50% more than that because of the COVID. 60% are grants. Well, what's the detail? Who's getting the grants? And this is something I'll touch on that maybe some of you may very well be in an advantageous position to take advantage of grants. And 40% are contracts. And the most important thing is deemed the world's largest marketplace. So why would you ignore not doing business with the U.S. government if it's the world's largest marketplace? So in your mix, your domestic U.S. government mix, And then international mix, you've got a real good, like a three-legged stool. So if one market drops ridiculously low, like say your domestic market has, for whatever reason, bankruptcies or whatever, you have the other two avenues that are floating your business, whether U.S. government stuff on the mainland or international business. Sorry about this, folks. I know this. I didn't realize it was so bad as this. But let me just state, I'll read it. U.S. business versus active business engaged. So there is 28 million U.S. businesses. So follow me through on this. People who are attempting to do business with the U.S. So if we're going to go 28 million on the left side, 136,000 have been trying to, and then 10,000 has been active with the Fed. So you on 28 million down to 136,000 to 10,000. So what does that mean? Well, we're talking perspective on competition. 10,000 active out of 22 million. That is a really, really, really small fraction, as you can see in the graphic. Imagine how small this number is of U.S. companies chasing international markets. So we can assume if this is a fraction of a fraction, that the number of people in the same boat, if we take that equation across, probably it's half again. So from the 28 million to the 135,000 to the 10,000 to maybe 5,000 or less. So your competition of the people that are doing international market is a fraction of a fraction. Okay, so let's look at U.S. export. Now, I'm sure some of these things you're not involved with, but on the other hand, the software that you're doing will support many of these products. So the top exports of the United States is refined petroleum. Okay, refined petroleum and crude petroleum is 61 billion, cars are 56 billion, integrated circuits is 41 billion, and vehicle parts. Now, you say, well, I'm not making a vehicle part. I'm not making the circuits. I don't have a manufacturing plant, but every one of these players are needing specialized software, specialized inventory control. There's a many services within those exports that are required. Now, let's look at who the key markets are. The largest market, which is in my location, just north of the border, is 252 billion, exporting mostly to Canada. Mexico is next, 235 billion. So you're not having to go very far to whether Canada or to Mexico. Like they are like completely next door to you. And then China is 103 billion. I'm not sure what's happening with that, with the crazy trade issues that are happening. I don't think that's reducing. Japan, solid market at 70, but all the way down to Germany at 59 billion. And that's the predominant markets. But many other products are existing beyond oil and cars. And the most important is 75% of this trade stuff that I'm talking about is to Canada and Mexico. Now, Canada, US, and Mexico had the North American Trade Agreement, and that was replaced. It took a long time, a lot of ego going on with President Trump and the President of Mexico and the Prime Minister of Canada just had to sort of bite their lip and not say anything and just humor the situation. But at least it got signed. It's called the USMCA. They changed it to US being first, United States, Mexico, Canada. And it was designed to create a more level playing field for American workers, including improved rules of origin for autos, trucks, and other products, and disciplines on currency manipulation. Not sure what they mean by that. Benefiting American farmers, ranchers, and agribusiness by modernizing. And when you think about modernizing and strengthening the food and agricultural trade, that includes Food tracing, that includes all kinds of use of IT, whether precision agriculture or other types of agribusiness stuff that is an IT focused. So that's critical in this. It's not just shoveling manure. It's definitely a very IT intensive industry. I highlighted in bold, it's supporting a 21st century economy through new protections for U.S. intellectual property and ensuring opportunities for trade in U.S. services. So before, under the North American Free Trade Agreement, you did not have access to services in Mexico and Canada. Guess what? You have it now under this new USMCA. That's very important in terms of pushing your product and services into those two markets, which are 75% of the export market, which I'm going to emphasize as you venture forward. Look at Mexico and Canada as two of the key markets, and the numbers bear witness to it, what I'm saying. So the new chapters also include digital trade, anti-corruption, good regulatory practices, as well as chapter devoted to ensuring the small and medium-sized enterprise benefit from the agreement. Again, small and medium-sized enterprises. I am sure the people that are on the call are in that category. So the agreement is going to be, that's rolled out, is favorable to yourselves as being small or medium enterprises. Okay, U.S. government support for export. Federal government agencies perform a wide variety of functions that contribute to export promotion, including providing information, counseling, export assistance service, funding, feasibility studies, financing, and ensuring U.S. trade, conducting government-to-government advocacy, and negotiating new trade. So if I was sitting in San Juan or some other city and saying, wonder what the government can do for me, I'd look it up, who your trade commissioner is in San Juan. I'm assuming they would be there, and say, I'm looking at doing, I understand the USMCA is funding different projects. What can you do for me in terms of doing I want to do a feasibility study. I want to do a marketing plan into Mexico or into Canada. And again, as I say, this is right from their website. They would fund that feasibility study, whether you do it yourself or you have a third-party marketing company do it for you. But what I'm saying is the U.S. government is not your enemy. Appropriate federal government agencies are there to help you if you are interested in moving in this direction. So you need a strategy. So as the picture indicates here, you have to have your vision, you have to know your key markets, you have to have the right, in your SWOT analysis, what your team is like, what is your opportunities, what is your, threats in the marketplace. You have to have a solid marketing and business plan. So if I was venturing forward, I would prepare a particular international trade business plan. I would identify what my key markets are. I would clearly find out from your U.S. trade representative, and again, the U.S. commercial services have this at your fingertips. And again, find out the details. When are they doing trade missions? Can I join that trade mission? Maybe they do a circuit. Maybe they hit a whole bunch of cities in Canada, a whole bunch of cities in Mexico or the Caribbean, whatever. But, can I join that? Will you sponsor me to be on that trade mission? So the mission is of the USCS, in this case, the U.S. Commercial Service, is to promote the export of goods and services from the United States, particularly by small and medium-sized business, to represent U.S. business interest internationally and to help U.S. business find qualified international partners. Now, that's part of the job here, is that you can walk into a marketplace and go fresh, right? But if you did your research and you found some suitable partners that don't provide that goods or services that you have, they may be a qualified international partner for me. But you need a Dun and Bradstreet on them. Or do they actually, how long have they been in business? What's their credit rating like? Let the government do that for you. You know, let them, that's what they're paid to do. So what are your advantages? Well, Puerto Rico has huge advantages for these trade missions. You're sitting in a perfect spot. Okay, you're in proximity to 661,344,742 people. And probably the time I finish this presentation, 743. Besides the Portuguese market, it's a huge Spanish market in Latin America. You guys are walking into the marketplace being bilingual. I could tell you from working with ICANN and with ISOC, I was on a call today, and we had representatives from Argentina, Colombia, different places. And as soon as the translator stopped translating from English to Spanish, they all left. So there is, you guys have a much more, I guess, proactive concept of learning English. In many parts of Latin America, it's sort of, they treat it as knowing English is something that is, I don't know, it's a gringo language and imperialism and colonialism and what can I say? So there's some dynamics there. But as I said, there is incentives for U.S. government to encourage minority businesses. You guys, there's slice and dice how you will label yourself. And, I know the American U.S. census is a little confusing right now in terms of how do you self-identify. But whether of color or of minority languages or whatever which way you want to self-identify, you could come up as a minority business. And that is a very positive thing in terms of doing business with help from the U.S. government. So you go into these marketplaces, you need to make some considerations. There may be, if you have manuals that you have online or whatever, your product packaging and whatnot. If it's in Canada, we have a bilingual act, not like the United States. If you get a bottle of Tylenol or a box of cereal, or you go buy a battery at the store, everything has to be in French and English. So French and English have equal size, and anyone, when they buy the product, it's definitely available according to the rules. So if you are looking at selling a product within Canada and it gets into the retail market, you have to make sure that it's the French language is there. Obviously, if you're going into Brazil, Portuguese, there's the Dutch colonies, and there's a small amount of French and Dutch, like I said, in the Caribbean, but probably not a key market for you. Business registration, as in case of Canada, this is called a GST, Goods and Service Tax, or Harmonized Sales Tax. You guys still work in one of the 3 countries in the world that use imperial measurements, so weights in metric. So there's got to be making sure your products are of equivalence in metric. And again, look at what the compliance to domestic rules are. Looking at what is your typical shipping and local distribution channels. Looking at ways of working with distribution hubs or agents, associations, as well, business chambers of commerce in those countries may not be a bad idea, and working with service centers. So what are the Canadian opportunities? Well, it's a 38 million population, not that big compared to the United States, but the GDP is 1.63 trillion. It's larger than Brazil and Australia. It's a member of the G9 nations, and government purchases are 22 billion. So significant amount that you, and again, USMCA allows you to bid or compete as an equal footing for those government purchases. So this is what I recommend. If you are going to look at Canada as a market, this is the way I would do it. Use something called MRCS, and you can see in the link here, and it's in the slides are shared, and the link to MRCS is available. Now, MRCS is where Canadian suppliers and contractors go to search for business opportunities. You'll find thousands of opportunities to bid on and when to grow your business. They've been around for more than 20 years in public and private sector procurement. MRCS continues to be Canada's e-trading service of choice. So not only you can get the tender documents, you can bid on it, but you can also, because as a member of MRCS, you can find out what the closing bids are. So again, that's part of your market research. So this is sort of a graphic on how the MRCS system works. MRCS has a tiered pricing structure, and if you desire the full RFPs, the request for a proposal or tender documents, they charge accordingly for those, besides the base MRCS membership. As a member, you will have access to record results of all tenders to build your pricing strategy. Remember that the Canadian and US dollar is not at par. I just paid out 400 US to a person in Colombia today, and it wasn't for drugs, by the way. It was 500 Canadian. So there's the ratio. 400 US cost me 500 Canadian. Oh, there you go. Roughly $1 US is worth 1.25 Canadian. Not too bad, you know. So Export Development Corporation, this is a Canadian federal agency. It's a switch. It's a flip side of your US agencies. But you know what? Look at it laterally. They may have potential partners in Canada through the EDC saying, hey, I got this wonderful service. No one in Canada is doing, but can you partner me up with a company that might be a real good potential partner? But also the research and stats provided by EDC is well worth checking. So I've provided you with that link. Okay, let me, I don't have that much further to go, but let me talk about Mexico. And again, I'm stressing, despite my experience in South Africa and China, my recommendation to all of you tonight is do something close to home. Use your natural assets of your language skills, i.e. Mexico, and take advantage of the USMCA. So USDA has a 1.1 US dollar, I should say, 1.1 trillion economy, and is second largest in Latin America, and the country maintains a deep trade and investment ties with the United States. Mexico remains an upper middle class member of the G20, not the G9, of the OECD, with a per capita of GDP of 8,346. Not huge GDP, but not bad. You really don't, you know, who buys your products, you know, if you're selling to the poorest persons, it's a concern, but the people that are going to buy your goods and have the money to spend. Two-way trade in goods and services between U.S. and Mexico was 582 billion, man, positioning Mexico as the third largest overall trading partner. During this period, U.S. exported to Mexico 235 billion and imported 347 billion. So it's a big chunk of change. And again, even though that, you know, look at the guy who owns a lot of that telco. One of the richest guys in the world is Mexican. Mexico is the 19th largest investor in the U.S., having amassed a total stock of 42.9 billion. Think possible partnerships. Think of your company can be a gateway for these companies and investment. So in summary, do your homework, find out where you would like to go. Think of the resources that are out there. Do a SWOT analysis of your company. What is its strengths? What is its weaknesses? Where is the opportunities? Where is the threats? Work with the U.S. Commercial services to see how they can work with you in terms of helping you market that product to an international market. Strongly suggest attending online and in-person information seminars these people are doing, whether overseas, you can be part of a trade mission, but because of COVID, you may have to do it online. Pick your choice of the first market preference. Start somewhere. If you're looking at international market, if Canada's the market for you, as I said earlier on, the first thing you need to do, it's very cost effective, join MRCS and start your process of research. So these are some of the research resources, and there's my, I'll leave that on for a second. That's my email address, and you can get hold of me at the current project through the Internet Governance Hub as well. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you a lot, Glenn. Now we can open for the Q&A. So let me first check the chat. If anyone has any questions, you can go right ahead and open your microphone and webcam if you wish.
I'm looking at the chat. I'm not sure what I missed.
No, it's just someone said thank you for the
okay.
the webinar, but yeah, there's no questions in the chat, not yet.
You know, we myself and Alfredo, we do weekly talks with on internet governance, and you know, it's deep into that, and we organize speakers, Sophie. So I'm used to silence from the audience. It's late. People are hungry. They're thinking of all kinds of things other than hearing me. You know, so I'm not offended if nobody has anything to say, but I'm just looking at the chat. If somebody wants to just type it, if they don't like to speak.
Yeah, no problem. And if someone has a question that they think of after, you can also write Glenn, and I will connect you guys. So, and this recording will be available in the YouTube channel, and I will share it tomorrow to our mailing list. So if you want to share it, or if you missed something, you could go right ahead to our YouTube channel and see all of our webinars there. So
it would be good for me because I wasn't sure what your expectations were, so I basically identified what I thought was an approach. So I may have disappointed some of you. I'm sorry about that, but maybe your local commercial services might be a good person to maybe in the future to suggest coming in as a speaker, because they're working with you guys locally. That might be something. But I could tell I've had this international experience. It's tough. There's no school to go to. You just have to dive in and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think it was a great introduction, very clear, concise. So I think it was well done. So I think if there's no questions, we can just go right ahead and finish and wrap this webinar. And see you guys in the next webinar. Will be November 9th for federal fundings. So don't miss that one. Glenn, thank you so much for tonight. Awesome. We'll see you again soon. Hopefully we'll stay in touch, and if anyone has any questions, you could write Glenn. So I'll contact you guys. So
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.